Bullies mock the new kid. Not knowing he's a trained martial artist, what would you do if the entire school turned against you on your very first day? How would you react when your deepest secret could instantly change everything, but revealing it might cause even more problems? This is the story of Michael Chen, a 16-year-old who became the target of the worst bullies at Westlake High. They thought they found an easy victim, a quiet, skinny Asian kid who never fought back. They pushed him, mocked his accent, and humiliated him daily. But what these bullies didn't know was that behind Michael's shy exterior lay a secret that would soon turn their world upside down. Michael had just moved to a small American town from San Francisco. His father, a struggling restaurant owner, had relocated the family in search of a fresh start after their business failed. For Michael, this meant leaving behind his friends, his community, and most importantly, the dojo where he'd trained for the past 10 years, earning a black belt and winning 3 state championships in martial arts. But on his first day at Westlake High, Michael made a decision. He would hide his past and start fresh. No more fighting, no more competitions. He wanted to be known for something else, maybe his grades, his kindness, or just as a regular teenager trying to fit in. Just keep your head down and focus on school, his father had advised. Fighting is behind us now. We came here for peace. Michael nodded, promising to honor his father's wishes. But as he walked through the front doors of Westlake High that Monday morning, he had no idea how difficult that promise would be to keep. The hallways fell silent as he made his way to the office. Whispers followed him, stares lingered too long. Michael clutched his backpack tighter, feeling the weight of 100 eyes tracking his every move. "Check out the new kid," someone snickered. "Bet he can't even speak English." Michael kept walking, his face burning. He understood English perfectly. He was born in America after all, but he remained silent, remembering his promise. What Michael didn't notice was the group of seniors watching him from the corner. Led by Brad Thompson, captain of the wrestling team and self-appointed king of Westlake High, they sized up their new target with predatory interest. "Fresh meat," Brad whispered to his friends, a malicious smile spreading across his face. This semester just got a lot more interesting. Little did they know, they weren't dealing with an ordinary new kid, and Michael's patience had limits that were about to be severely tested. But what happened next would set in motion a chain of events that nobody at Westlake High would ever forget. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should fear the most. The first week at Westlake High was worse than Michael could have imagined. Brad and his crew of wrestlers made it their personal mission to break the new kid's spirit. It started small. Shoulder checks in the hallway, books knocked from his hands, whispers that followed him everywhere. Michael endured it silently, his muscles tensing with each encounter, years of training screaming at him to defend himself. But he remembered his father's words and the promise he'd made. In the cafeteria, Michael sat alone, picking at his food and trying to be invisible. He missed the dojo in San Francisco, the discipline, the respect, the feeling of belonging. Here, he was nothing but a target. "Hey, Jackie Chan, this seat taken?" Brad loomed over Michael's table, flanked by his friends. Without waiting for an answer, they surrounded him, sliding into seats and invading his space. Michael kept his eyes down. "I'm just eating." "Oh, he does speak English," Brad mocked, drawing laughs from his crew. "I figured you'd just bow or something." He mimicked an exaggerated bow, earning more laughter. Michael's chopsticks paused halfway to his mouth. 10 years of martial arts had taught him discipline beyond what these boys could imagine. He set his food down slowly. "I was born in California," he said quietly. "Then what's with the chopsticks, China boy?" Brad reached across and knocked them from Michael's hand, sending them clattering to the floor. "When in Rome, right?" Michael felt his pulse quickening, the familiar pre-fight adrenaline rushing through his veins. His hand twitched, muscle memory almost taking over. One quick move, and Brad would be on the ground before he knew what happened. But Michael took a deep breath instead. "Leave me alone, please," Michael said, his voice steady despite the fire building inside him. Brad leaned in close. "Or what?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Michael met Brad's eyes for the first time, and something in his gaze made Brad hesitate for just a fraction of a second. There was something there, something unexpected that didn't align with the narrative Brad had constructed about this quiet Asian kid. But the moment passed, and Brad's arrogance returned. "That's what I thought," he sneered, standing up. "Nothing but a coward." As they walked away, Michael heard one of them say, "This is going to be too easy." If only they knew. At home that evening, Michael's father noticed his silence at dinner. "Everything okay at the new school?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. Michael pushed his food around his plate. "It's fine." "You don't look fine," his father pressed. "Is someone giving you trouble?" Michael considered telling his father everything about Brad, the harassment, how hard it was not to fight back. But he saw the weariness in his father's eyes, the stress lines that had deepened since they'd lost the restaurant. His dad didn't need another problem to solve. "Just normal new kid stuff," Michael shrugged. "I can handle it." After dinner, Michael retreated to his room and opened his closet. Pushed to the back behind hanging clothes was a worn duffel bag. He unzipped it slowly, revealing his folded GI, his black belt, and beneath them 3 gleaming championship medals. His fingers traced the embossed dragon on his belt. For a moment, he was back in the dojo, his sensei's voice clear in his mind. True strength isn't about winning fights, it's about knowing when not to fight. Michael zipped the bag closed and pushed it back into the darkness of his closet. He'd made a promise, but as he lay in bed that night, he wondered how long he could keep it, because what happened the next day would push Michael closer to his breaking point, testing his resolve in ways he never anticipated. And Brad Thompson was about to discover that poking a tiger, even one in hiding, eventually has consequences. 2 weeks into the semester, and Michael's life at Westlake had become unbearable. What started as teasing had escalated into something much darker. "Look who it is, the kung fu kid who can't fight back," Brad announced loudly as Michael entered the gym for PE class. The nickname had stuck, a cruel irony given Michael's hidden talents. Today, the class was divided into teams for basketball. Despite being athletic, Michael found himself the last one picked, an intentional slight orchestrated by Brad. "Maybe in China they play with smaller balls," someone shouted when Michael missed a shot. The laughter stung worse than any physical blow. "I'm from California," Michael corrected automatically, his voice barely audible above the snickering. "What was that, China boy?" "Couldn't hear you," Brad taunted, bouncing the ball inches from Michael's face. Michael felt the familiar calm settling over him, the pre-fight focus that had won him championships. His stance shifted automatically, weight centered, ready to move. The ball hovering before him might as well have been an opponent's fist. Coach Martinez blew his whistle. "Thompson, stop messing around and play the game." Brad sneered but backed off, shoulder-checking Michael as he passed. "Later, loser." After class, Michael headed to the showers alone, timing it so the others would be gone. But Brad and his friends were waiting. "Thought you could avoid us?" Brad grinned maliciously. "We noticed you've been hiding in here." Michael backed up, evaluating his options. 5 opponents, limited space, multiple exit points. His mind ran tactical assessments automatically. "I don't want trouble," Michael said, the mantra he'd repeated daily since arriving. "Too bad," Brad replied, "because trouble wants you." What happened next would have shocked anyone who knew Michael from San Francisco. They grabbed him, forced him into the shower stalls, turned on the cold water. Michael stood there, fully clothed, water plastering his clothes to his body, eyes closed as they laughed and filmed it on their phones. "Post it," Brad ordered one of his friends. "Tag everyone." By lunch, the video had spread throughout the school. Michael walked through the cafeteria, still damp, whispers and snickers following him like shadows. He sat alone, unpacking his lunch with methodical precision. A group of girls at the next table glanced at him and giggled, looking at their phones. Michael knew they were watching his humiliation. For the first time since arriving, anger replaced fear. His chopsticks snapped in his grip. That afternoon, a notification popped up on his phone. Someone had tagged him in a post. There it was. Michael standing soaked and defeated in the shower, his eyes downcast. The caption read, "New kid takes his first American shower. Chinese takeout." The comments were worse. What a loser. No wonder he doesn't fight back. Probably crying for his mommy. Michael's thumb hovered over the screen. With 3 taps, he could show them exactly who they were dealing with. His competition videos were still online. Footage of him dropping opponents twice his size, executing flawless techniques that had earned him statewide recognition. But he didn't. He switched off his phone instead. At home, Michael went straight to the basement where his father had set up a small punching bag in the corner. For the first time since moving, Michael unwrapped his hand wraps and began to hit. Each punch carried weeks of bottled rage. The bag swung violently as his fists found their rhythm. "Michael!" His father stood at the bottom of the stairs, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" Michael stopped, breathing hard. "Nothing." His father approached slowly, examining his son's reddened knuckles. "This doesn't look like nothing." "It's just school stuff," Michael mumbled. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember what your sensei taught you. Fighting is always the last resort." "What if there's no other choice?" Michael asked, his voice cracking slightly. His father sighed. "There's always another choice, son." But as Michael lay in bed that night, scrolling through endless comments on the humiliating video, he wasn't so sure anymore. Tomorrow was Friday, and he'd heard Brad planning something special for him. A welcome ceremony, they called it. Michael opened his drawer and pulled out his most prized possession, a small jade pendant his grandfather had given him before his first tournament. "For courage," his grandfather had said. He clutched it tightly, making a decision. One more day. He would endure one more day of Brad's torment. After that, well, Brad Thompson might finally learn who he'd really been tormenting all along, because the next day would change everything, pushing Michael to a breaking point that would shock everyone at Westlake High. Friday morning arrived with an ominous feeling hanging in the air. Michael dressed with unusual care, selecting clothes that allowed for maximum movement. Out of habit, he wrapped his hands with thin layers of athletic tape beneath his sleeves, competition preparation, ingrained from years of training. Before leaving his room, Michael paused at his dresser. The jade pendant gleamed in the morning light. He slipped it around his neck, tucking it beneath his shirt where it rested cool against his skin. For courage, he whispered, echoing his grandfather's words. At school, Michael noticed something different immediately. The usual taunts were replaced with secretive smiles and knowing glances. Students whispered as he passed, but instead of the usual mockery, there was anticipation. "It's happening at lunch," he overheard someone say. "Brad's got something huge planned." Michael's body tensed, but he kept walking, head high. Whatever was coming, he'd face it. In chemistry class, he found a surprising ally. Emma Santos, a quiet girl who sat behind him, slid a note onto his desk. "Be careful at lunch. Brad's planning something. Skip it if you can." Michael glanced back at her, their eyes meeting briefly. He nodded in thanks. It was the first friendly gesture he'd experienced since arriving. When the lunch bell rang, Michael considered Emma's warning. He could hide in the library, avoid whatever spectacle Brad had planned. The old Michael, the one desperate to fit in and honor his father's wishes, would have done exactly that. But something had shifted inside him. He was tired of running. The cafeteria fell into an unnatural hush when Michael entered. He felt dozens of eyes tracking him as he made his way to his usual isolated table. Brad and his crew were nowhere to be seen. Michael unpacked his lunch with deliberate calm, using his chopsticks with practiced precision despite the tension coursing through his body. From his peripheral vision, trained to spot attacks before they happened, he noticed students positioning their phones, ready to record. "Hey, China boy!" Brad's voice boomed across the cafeteria. Michael didn't turn. He continued eating, his movements measured and controlled. Footsteps approached, and suddenly Brad was looming over him, flanked by his usual followers. But today, there was something different. Brad was wearing a ridiculous outfit, a cheap Halloween costume version of a karate guy with a makeshift black belt tied sloppily around his waist. "We decided you've been missing your homeland customs," Brad announced loudly, earning scattered laughter. "So we're bringing them to you." His friends revealed similar costumes, each more offensive than the last. They struck exaggerated poses, making stereotypical hi-ya sounds while butchering martial arts stances. "Stand up," Brad commanded. "We're going to teach you some real American fighting." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Even the lunch staff watched, unsure whether to intervene. Slowly, Michael set down his chopsticks. Time seemed to slow, just as it did before competitions. He became hyper-aware of everything. Brad's stance, unbalanced, weight too far forward, the distance between them, 3 steps, potential weapons, lunch tray, chair, escape routes, 2 clear paths. "I said stand up." Brad grabbed Michael's shoulder, fingers digging in painfully. Michael looked up, finally meeting Brad's eyes directly. Something in his gaze made Brad's smirk falter. "Don't touch me," Michael said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. Brad's grip tightened. "Or what? You'll cry to your mommy." For a split second, a flicker of something dangerous flashed across Michael's face. The face of a champion, not a victim. "Last warning," Michael said, his voice deadly calm. "Take your hand off me." The confidence in Michael's tone caught Brad off guard. This wasn't the same cowering kid he'd been tormenting for weeks. There was something different today, something threatening. But backing down now would mean losing face in front of the entire school. Brad doubled down. "Make me," he challenged, shoving Michael's shoulder hard. Michael didn't budge, not even an inch. It was like pushing against a concrete wall. Confusion crossed Brad's face. He shoved again, harder. Michael stood up in one fluid motion, his chair barely making a sound as it slid back. He was shorter than Brad by several inches, but suddenly he seemed to command the space between them. "Not here," Michael said, his voice low enough that only Brad could hear. "Behind the gym, after school." Brad's eyes widened momentarily before his bravado returned. "You challenging me, China boy? Your funeral." Michael held his gaze steadily. "If that's what you think," whispers erupted around the cafeteria. Nobody had expected the quiet new kid to stand up to Brad Thompson, much less challenge him to a fight. Brad laughed, playing to his audience. "You heard it, everyone. The Kung Fu kid thinks he can take me on." He looked around at the crowd forming. "Behind the gym, 3:30. Be there to witness the welcome ceremony this loser deserves." As Brad and his crew swaggered away, Emma approached Michael's table. "Are you crazy?" she whispered. "Brad's the wrestling captain. He's hurt people before." Michael simply nodded, a strange calmness settling over him. "I know what I'm doing." "You don't have to prove anything," Emma insisted. Michael glanced at her, a faint smile crossing his lips for the first time. "Actually, I think I do." Word spread through the school like wildfire. By final period, even teachers had heard whispers of the impending fight. One pulled Michael aside after class. "I hope you're not planning anything foolish, Mr. Chen," he said sternly. "No, sir," Michael replied truthfully. What he planned wasn't foolish at all. It was calculated, necessary, and long overdue. As the final bell rang, Michael walked to his locker with purposeful strides. He removed his jade pendant and kissed it once before carefully placing it in his pocket. Then he headed toward the gym, followed by a growing crowd of students eager to witness what they assumed would be his humiliation. Little did they know that they were about to witness something else entirely. Because in roughly 15 minutes, the legend of Michael Chen would be born at Westlake High. The area behind the gym had transformed into an impromptu arena. Students formed a circle, phones raised to capture what everyone expected would be a one-sided beating. Brad stood in the center, still wearing the ridiculous costume, playing to the crowd with exaggerated karate chops. "Place your bets," someone shouted. "How long before the new kid starts crying?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Michael pushed through, his face impassive. The jade pendant lay heavy in his pocket, a reminder of who he really was, beneath the facade of the quiet new kid. Brad's eyes narrowed when he spotted Michael. "Didn't think you'd actually show up." Michael said nothing. He simply removed his jacket, folding it with precise movements, before handing it to Emma, who had followed him despite her concerns. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes," Michael replied softly. "I do." He stepped into the circle, and the crowd's jeers intensified. Michael closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. The noise faded away, replaced by his sensei's voice echoing in his memory. "Your greatest strength is that opponents underestimate you. Use their arrogance against them." "Rules are simple," Brad announced, cracking his knuckles. "You're done when you can't get up or when you cry for mercy." He smirked. "Any last words before I send you back to China?" Michael's expression didn't change. "I was born in California," he said, for what felt like the 100th time. Brad lunged forward, swinging a heavy right hook aimed at Michael's face, a wrestling captain's attempt at a knockout punch, telegraphed so clearly that Michael could have dodged it blindfolded. Time slowed. Michael's training took over, sidestep, wrist control, redirection of force. With minimal movement, Michael shifted left, his right hand catching Brad's wrist mid-swing. Using Brad's own momentum, he guided the larger boy forward, past his target. Brad stumbled, confusion crossing his face. "Lucky dodge," Brad snarled, regaining his balance. The crowd murmured. This time, Brad approached more cautiously, feinting with his left before driving forward with a wrestler's takedown attempt. Michael pivoted on his rear foot, his hip rotating with textbook precision. Brad found himself grasping at air, then staggering forward into empty space once again. Frustrated, Brad charged like a bull, all technique abandoned in favor of raw aggression. "Stand still and fight." What happened next occurred so quickly that many students would later argue about exactly what they'd seen. Michael sidestepped again, but this time countered with a perfect sweep to Brad's lead leg. Brad's balance collapsed instantly. As he fell, Michael controlled his descent with a grip on his arm, guiding him to the ground firmly but safely. Brad found himself staring up at the sky, the wind knocked from his lungs, the new kid standing calmly over him. "What the hell?" Brad gasped, scrambling to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment. The crowd had gone silent. Brad attacked again, throwing wild punches that Michael deflected with minimal movement, never striking back, simply redirecting Brad's increasing fury. Each failed attack made Brad's movements more desperate, more exhausting. "Fight back!" Brad shouted, his breathing heavy. "I am," Michael replied calmly. "You just don't understand what you're seeing." Something in Michael's tone, the absolute confidence, made Brad hesitate. In that moment of doubt, Michael executed a textbook arm drag, spinning Brad around and taking his back. Before anyone could register what was happening, Brad was on the ground again, Michael controlling him with a simple wrist lock that sent shooting pain up Brad's arm without causing actual damage. "Yield," Michael said quietly. "Get off me." Brad struggled, but each movement only increased the pain. Michael applied slightly more pressure. "Yield," he repeated. "Okay, fine. I yield." Brad shouted, humiliation burning in his eyes. Michael released him immediately and stepped back. The crowd remained stunned into silence, phones still recording the unexpected upset. Brad scrambled to his feet, rage and embarrassment warring on his face. "You got lucky, that's all." "It wasn't luck," Michael said, his voice carrying across the silent schoolyard. Then he did something unexpected. He bowed slightly to Brad, a gesture of respect from one competitor to another. Brad lunged again, abandoning all pretense of a fair fight. But this time, Michael had had enough. With lightning speed, he intercepted Brad's attack with a simple cross-block, followed by an open palm strike to the chest that stopped just short of contact. Brad froze, suddenly aware of how close he'd come to being seriously hurt. Michael's hand hovered an inch from his sternum, a demonstration of control that was more intimidating than any actual blow. "I could have ended this in the first 5 seconds, Michael said, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I've been letting you attack because I wanted you to understand something." He lowered his hand. "I choose not to hurt you. Remember that the next time you think about bullying someone." The silence was absolute. Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, someone started to clap. Others joined in, the applause spreading until it filled the air. Brad looked around, the reality of his defeat sinking in. His friends stood awkwardly, phones lowered, no longer eager to document his humiliation. Michael turned to walk away, but Brad, unable to accept his lost status, made one final desperate lunge from behind. "Michael, watch out!" Emma shouted. Without even turning, Michael sidestepped at the last possible moment. Brad's momentum carried him forward into empty air. He stumbled, losing balance and crashing face first into the wall of the gym with a sickening thud. Gasps erupted. Brad slumped to the ground, blood streaming from his nose. Michael knelt beside his fallen tormentor, checking his pulse with the practiced movement of someone trained in first aid. "Someone get the school nurse," he instructed calmly. As 2 students ran for help, Michael placed Brad in the recovery position, ensuring his airway remained clear. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the boy they'd witnessed being bullied for weeks now took charge with unexpected authority. "Is he okay?" someone asked nervously. "He will be," Michael assured them. "But someone should call his parents." The school nurse arrived, followed closely by the principal. As Brad was helped to the nurse's office, the principal turned to Michael with a stern expression. "My office. Now, Mr. Chen." As Michael followed the principal, whispers erupted behind him. The story was already evolving, growing with each retelling. By morning, the legend of Michael Chen would be fully formed, the unassuming new kid who took down the school bully without even throwing a punch. Emma caught up to him, handing back his jacket. "That was amazing," she said. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Michael gave her a small smile. "I wasn't fighting, I was just redirecting his energy." As he walked toward the principal's office, Michael slipped his hand into his pocket, his fingers closing around the jade pendant. For the first time since arriving at Westlake High, he felt like himself again. The punishment that awaited him didn't matter. Something more important had been restored: his identity, his confidence, and perhaps most importantly, his honor. Because sometimes standing up for yourself isn't about winning a fight. It's about refusing to remain a victim any longer. 3 days of suspension. That was Michael's punishment for engaging in physical altercation on school property. Brad received the same, plus mandatory counseling for bullying. When his father picked him up from the principal's office, Michael braced himself for disappointment. They drove in silence until they reached a small park several blocks from home. His father pulled over and turned off the engine. "The principal showed me the videos," his father said finally. "Everyone filmed it." Michael stared at his hands. "I'm sorry I broke my promise." His father was quiet for a long moment. "Your sensei used to say that promises made under false pretenses are not truly binding." He turned to face his son. "I asked you to hide who you are. That was my mistake." "You were trying to protect me," Michael said. "No," his father shook his head. "I was trying to protect myself. After losing the restaurant, I felt like a failure. I wanted a fresh start where no one knew us. But asking you to deny your accomplishments, that was wrong." Michael looked up, surprised by his father's words. "I saw how you controlled the situation," his father continued. "You could have hurt that boy badly, but you chose restraint. That shows true mastery." Pride flickered in his eyes. "I'm not happy about the suspension, but I'm proud of how you handled yourself." When Michael returned to school the following Monday, everything had changed. The videos had spread throughout the school and beyond. One had over 50,000 views online, titled "Bully Gets Schooled by Secret Martial Arts Master." As he walked through the hallways, whispers followed him, but different ones now. Admiration, respect, awe. "Is it true you're a black belt? I heard you won championships. Can you teach me that move?" Michael answered their questions honestly, no longer hiding his past. His jade pendant hung visibly around his neck. Emma met him at his locker. "You're famous now," she smiled. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Michael admitted. "For weeks, I tried to be invisible. Now everyone sees me." "They always saw you," Emma corrected him. "Now they see the real you." In the cafeteria, Michael's formerly empty table was now the most sought-after spot. Students who had never spoken to him before competed for seats nearby. Even some of Brad's former crew approached cautiously, offering awkward apologies. And then, 3 days after his return, Brad himself appeared before Michael's table. The cafeteria hushed immediately. Brad's nose was still slightly swollen, a visible reminder of his defeat. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. Michael nodded, sensing the vulnerability beneath Brad's request. Brad sat down, uncomfortable under the stares of the entire cafeteria. "Look, I was a jerk." "Yes, you were," Michael agreed simply. A faint smile crossed Brad's face. "Direct. I can respect that." He hesitated. "The thing is, I've been wondering if you could, maybe, show me some of those moves." Michael studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because what you did was impressive," Brad admitted. "You controlled the whole fight without throwing a single punch. I've been wrestling for years and never seen anything like that." "It's not about the moves," Michael explained. "It's about discipline and respect. Are you interested in those too?" Brad considered this. "I'd like to try." Michael nodded. "Then come to my house this weekend. My dad and I are setting up a small dojo in our basement. You can be my first student." Word spread quickly about Michael's weekend training sessions. What began with Brad soon expanded to include a dozen students, then more. Michael's father, seeing his son's passion reignited, contacted Michael's old sensei in San Francisco for guidance on establishing a proper dojo. By the end of the semester, Chen Family Martial Arts had found a small commercial space near downtown. Michael taught alongside his father, who rediscovered his own love for the discipline that had been part of their family for generations. On the night before their official opening, Michael stood in the empty dojo, surveying the transformation. Mats covered the floor, traditional scrolls hung on the walls. In the place of honor was a framed photo of Michael with his grandfather, both in their GIs, both holding championship medals. His father entered, smiling at the sight of his son. "Your grandfather would be proud." "I wish he could see this," Michael said softly. "He can," his father replied, pointing to Michael's heart. "The lessons he taught you live on in what you'll teach others." Michael touched the jade pendant around his neck. "For courage," he whispered. The next day, as students filed in for the inaugural class, Michael recognized many faces from Westlake High, including Emma, who had become his closest friend, and surprisingly, Brad, who had discovered a genuine interest in martial arts once his ego was set aside. Michael stood before them, no longer hiding who he was or what he knew. "Martial arts isn't about fighting," he began. "It's about finding balance between strength and restraint, between action and wisdom." He looked around at the eager faces. "Each of you has your own battles, your own challenges. My promise is not to teach you how to hurt others, but how to center yourself, how to find your own courage when facing life's difficulties." Michael bowed to his students, who returned the gesture with genuine respect. Later that evening, as he locked up the dojo, Emma waited outside. "So, Sifu Chen," she teased, using the traditional title for a master. "Was it worth it? Standing up to Brad that day?" Michael considered the question. "I spent weeks trying to be someone I wasn't, pretending to be less than I am." He looked at the dojo sign bearing his family name. "Sometimes, The only way to find your place is to stop hiding who you really are. So what's next for the legendary Michael Chen? Emma asked, bumping his shoulder playfully. Michael smiled. Living authentically. No more masks. As they walked home under the setting sun, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From victim to legend, from hiding to teaching, from isolation to community. Sometimes life's greatest challenges reveal our hidden strengths. Sometimes the very things we try to conceal become our most powerful assets. And sometimes the people who try to break us end up transformed by the experience as much as we are. What in your life are you hiding? What power lies dormant within you, waiting for the moment you finally stand up and reveal your true self? Remember Michael's story the next time someone tries to make you feel small. Remember that the quiet person in the corner might be the strongest one in the room. And most importantly, remember that your greatest power often lies in the parts of yourself you've been afraid to show the world. Life will test you, challenge you, and sometimes try to break you. But like Michael, you always have a choice: to stay hidden or to rise up and show the world exactly who you are. The choice, as it always has been, is yours. So what will you do when your moment comes?